This will be my class 1 denture. Very common situation, clinical situation that we encounter in the clinic, and I will be designing a metal partial denture again. And just to refresh our memories, class 1s and class 2 dentures are referred to as tooth mucosal supported dentures, and challenging because we have the problem of having a tooth and a mucosa supported denture. And the major challenge is the difference between the displacement of the tooth and the mucosa. And we have to, in our design, we'll have to look at that. Clinically, we're going to have to examine the tissues quite clearly, look at the support that the ridge brings before we design our denture. We also have a choice of acrylic, of a lingual plate or a lingual bar. And a bar is always the first choice, provided that I have 7 millimeters of space between the gingival margin of the teeth and the lingual frenum in the floor of the mouth. So I will be designing an metal partial denture, and in this case I will be designing a lingual bar. I have surveyed my models. I'm going to choose an RPI system because the RPI system has been designed to protect the abutment teeth. So in the event of torquing or rotational movements, the RPI system will protect the tooth and will then prevent the mobility of the tooth and maintain or retain the tooth in the patient's mouth. So I'm deciding to use a lingual bar because I've got my 7 millimeters. I have to provide support, and because it's an RPI system, which stands for a mesial rest, a proximal plate, and a gingival approaching eye bar, I'm going to provide a mesial rest and a mesial rest on a premolar. Also remember that the RPI clasp system can only be used on premolars, not on anterior teeth, not on canines. So the RPI system will give me a rest on the premolar and a rest on the premolar. My third rest, I will then use the distal occlusal surface of the 3-4 because I need a third rest to provide indirect retention. So I've got my 3 rest. The next step is to provide retention, and now I'm using my gingivally approaching clasps that will be engaging mesiobuccal undercut, and the gingivally approaching clasp forms part of the framework. It's also in chrome cobalt. So the next step is to connect the separate components. Remember, the RPI clasp system is also a self-reciprocating system. So I'm going to connect the separate components. Start in the 4th quadrant. Because I've got a proximal plate, it is not a guide plane, remember. That's on the distal surface of the tooth. I'm connecting my separate components, and I'm using a lingual bar. I've got my reciprocal arm, or reciprocation is provided by my proximal plate, my minor connector, so here I've used a lingual bar, an RPI system, and I'm indicating where my acrylic will be attached to my framework. Got my acrylic finish line, my retention holes for the mechanical attachment of the acrylic. I've got a 0.25 undercut that is used because I'm using chrome cobalt, And here I'm using my RPI system, a mesial rest, a proximal plate that is contacting the occlusal 2 millimeters of the abutment surface, and my gingivally approaching clasp. So I've got my 1, 2, 3 rest, so the third rest on the 3, 4 for indirect retention, and my RPI system that I've used. If you look at other designs that I could have used, this will be a lingual plate. Because I did not have 7 millimeters, I'm covering all the teeth. I'm still applying or using the RPI system, but because I'm using a plate, I have to cover all the teeth. If I relieve only one tooth, that will become a food trap. So this is another alternative, another design for my class 1 partial denture. An acrylic partial denture. This will be an acrylic partial denture again. Here I'm covering all the teeth because acrylic needs bulk for strength. I'm using a C clasp on the abutment teeth, on the premolar, the 3-4, 3-5, as well as the 4-4. I've used a distal occlusal rest made of half round wire, and I've got my 1, 2, 3 rest. So an acrylic partial denture, I have to cover all the teeth. I cannot and I do not have the choice of lingual bars.